Galw'r aelodau I drefn yr eitem gyntaf yn agenda'r prynawn yma yw'r cwestiynau i'r Prif Weinidog a'r cwestiwn cyntaf Dawn Bowden.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on tourism investment in Merthyr Tydfil and Rumney?
Well, over the past few years, we have provided support for a number of exciting capital projects and events in the area. For example, Bike Park Wales, Rock UK, and of course support for the Merthyr Rising Festival.
Thank you, First Minister. And given that this is Tourism Week, it's probably timely to remind ourselves that tourism, culture, our environment and our heritage will play a major part in securing a successful future for our Valleys communities as they make a valuable contribution to securing a diverse economy alongside the traditional sectors like manufacturing, public services and now an ever stronger retail offer. With this in mind, can you assure me that the recent Crucible report published by the Design Commission for Wales, which provides us all with a big vision for the huge future potential of Merthyr Tydfil's industrial heritage, will receive a full and proper consideration by the Welsh Government in order that all partners can work together to drive forward this ambitious project, which has the potential to provide us with a major Valleys attraction that could be as successful as Titanic Belfast or even the Eden project in Cornwall?
Well, I'm aware of the report. It does call for around £50 million to be spent on Merthyr's industrial past to make it a major tourist destination with a focus, of course, on Cyfarthfa Castle. I do look forward to being kept up to date with progress on developing the offer that was set out in the report. I understand that you met recently with the Minister for Culture, Tourism and Sport to discuss the report, and that is something, of course, that will continue, no doubt, in the future. I know that officials are also working on a number of exciting private sector proposals which will continue to develop the offer in the area. So a great deal of interest and, of course, a great deal to offer as far as Merthyr and Rumney are concerned.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. A report for the Design Commission for Wales has highlighted that there is a huge benefit that could be gained from the marketing Merthyr Tydfil industrial heritage, making the town a major tourist destination. Does the First Minister agree with me that a marketing strategy covering all the industrial heritage sites of South Wales, including canals such as Monmouthshire and Brecon, has the potential of providing a massive boost to tourism sector of our economy? Thank you.
Yes, because I think what's important is that we link what Merthyr has to offer with other attractions in the area as well. So the centrepiece of the Crucible report is regenerating Cyfarthfa Castle, but there are wider opportunities to bring together other local heritage landmarks, including, of course, the furnaces at Blaenavon and, of course, Big Pit, and, of course, the National Waterfront Museum as well. And being able to offer a collection of experiences to potential tourists of high quality will be important in the future.
Question 2, John Griffiths.
Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government support for sport and fitness in Newport?
Well, via Sport Wales, we're providing over £570,000 this year to Newport City Council to support the development of sport in the area. The Council has a contract with Newport Live to deliver a range of sport and physical activity programmes, allowing people of all ages to take part.
Yes, First Minister, sport and fitness are obviously vital for health and general quality of life. And thankfully, Newport is building a strong reputation in terms of its activities and facilities. As you mentioned, Newport Live is the bedrock, really, of delivery in Newport, with over 1.6 million participation at leisure facilities annually, and they work in close partnership with Newport City Council and many other organisations to reach every community in the city. Soon they will be on the Public Service Board and are very keen to support the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. They also helped with the delivery of the recent Newport Marathon and 10K, which saw several thousand runners on a route including the vibrant riverfront and the wonderful Gwent levels. It was a great occasion for the city, First Minister, as I know you are aware of, and it saw a really good turnout of local people in support. And the really good news is that there's almost a year to go before next year's event, which gives plenty of time for you and any others who may be considering participation to prepare. I'm sure, First Minister, you've joined me in recognising the sport and leisure activity in Newport at a scale which I think shows a good example to many others.
Well, the member has great faith in me, assuming that I would run a marathon in under a year. I will have more time on my hands after December, but I think that's misplaced faith. I understand the member for Carmarthen East and Ever was out jogging this morning. I think he's way ahead of me in terms of his ability to take part rather than myself. But he makes an important point, and that is that people now participate far more in activities than was the case. 25, 30 years ago, there were very few, if any, marathons that people took part in. It wasn't a question of trying to run to win, it was a question of taking part and finishing the course. That was the achievement for so many people. And the money that we have provided for Newport, working closely with Newport Live, working closely with Newport City Council, has ensured that Newport is ever stronger in terms of being on the map for physical activity. That's good for the city, but it's also good, of course, for all those who participate.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Free swimming for children was a flagship Labour Party policy designed to encourage children in Newport and elsewhere in Wales to get fit and healthy. It has now been announced that the Sports Wales is reviewing its support for free swimming for children. Given that children obesity in Wales is soaring, will the First Minister update this Assembly on its free swimming policy, and what measure does the Welsh Government intend to take to encourage children in Newport and Elvers to improve their fitness?
But we have no plans to change the policy. Policies are always under review, of course, but we recognise how important it is that children are able to access facilities in order to be active, in order that they remain active for the rest of their lives.
Cwestiwn yn awr gan arweinwyr y pleidiau, arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Lian Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. Does the First Minister agree that quite clearly there is a power grab going on by Whitehall on the EU withdrawal bill?
I think that was the case, but the agreement that we have reached now with the UK government has avoided that.
It's absurd and embarrassing in equal measure that this government chooses to endorse Theresa May rather than their own party leader. It's difficult to find any real benefits to exiting the EU, but there was one tiny sliver of positivity.
Can I hear the leader of Plaid Cymru, please? The question needs to be asked, please.
There was one sliver of positivity in that more decisions about Wales would be made in Wales, we were promised. That glimmer of hope is now gone. So, First Minister, tonight we will vote to accept this disastrous Brexit bill. You can choose who to back. Plaid Cymru, the Scottish Labour Party, the Scottish and English Liberal Democrat Party, the Green Party, the Scottish Government, legal and constitutional experts, your own party leader. Not even a single one of the 6 tests set up by this Assembly's own cross-party External Affairs Committee is met by this deal. The list goes on. Or you can back the Conservative and Unionist Party and UKIP. Who is it going to be?
Well, this is Wales, and as Welsh Labour, we in government have negotiated hard to get the best deal for Wales, which we believe we have achieved. What happens in Scotland and England is a matter for Scotland and England. That is what devolution is about. I note the support we received from the CBI, the report that we received from the Institute of Directors. I'm not clear what the position of the leader of Plaid Cymru is when she says that somehow powers are being taken away from Wales. All 64 areas will return to Wales when we leave the EU. There will be some powers that, by agreement, will then be kept in the freezer. Every government in the UK will be in the same position. They will not be able to legislate until such time as there is agreement to take those powers out of the freezer. That is a huge change from where we were last year, when all powers would have gone straight to Westminster, where ministers in Westminster would have had unlimited powers in terms of sunset clauses, and they would have determined when and if powers came to this Assembly and this government. We've moved a huge way since then, which is why we are the party of devolution.
Can you tell us then what extra powers have been delivered by this deal? Because when our steel industry needed Westminster's intervention, they were nowhere to be seen. When our family farms need the support to sustain their business, do you trust Westminster to be there? When our environment is being laid to waste, do you trust Westminster to be there? That's what this deal means. Westminster and not Wales will decide on issues that matter to people's lives here in Wales. Llywydd, the very principles of devolution are at stake with this. So, First Minister, now that you know the facts, now that all the players have shown their hands, what will it be? Are you going to stand up for Wales or for Westminster?
I will always stand up for my country. It may be that others will take a different view on what's best for Wales, but I respect their views, and I trust that the views of those on these benches will be respected as well, because they weren't last week. And I have to say, as far as I am concerned, while she mentions steel, we worked to save our steel industry. We did that with the powers that we have, and we did that by working with Tata and putting a financial package on the table. With regard to farming, we need to see the colour of Westminster's money. That much is true, because we can't pay farming subsidies. It's hugely important that an equivalent sum of money is put into a pot UK level and distributed in the same way as it is now, until such time as there is agreement to change the way money is spent and allocated. That much is very, very true. But as far as this agreement is concerned, there are restraints on the UK government that are equivalent to any restraints there would be on Welsh government. We are in a situation now, we are all in the same situation. There's great pressure on us all to come to agreed frameworks well before 7 years, because England's now in the same situation as Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And so it is in exactly the same situation as Scotland, Northern Ireland and England. So we have come to a position where a UK government a year ago was saying, and I'm not sure the situation would be different if there were a majority of 100 in the House of Commons, where they said all powers will come to us, we will determine when and if they come to the devolved administrations. That has changed, those powers will come to us, we will agree how they are frozen, we will agree the frameworks, and then of course we will all be on a level playing field across governments in the UK. This is the first time that the UK government has ever agreed to be bound in this way, and that is a tribute to the negotiating skills of Mark Drayford.
Arweinydd yr wrth blaid Andrew R.T. Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's not very often I start First Minister's questions by saying I agree with the First Minister. And he might not want that type of praise from the Leader of the Opposition here in the Senedd. But I'd like to ask you on the rail franchise, First Minister, and the tendering exercise that is underway at the moment. Obviously, there is huge anticipation of the improvements that people want to see in the rail franchise. I think across the chamber here, people genuinely recognise that the last 15 years have been difficult, shall we say, because the last franchise that was awarded had zero growth built into it. You yesterday, in the opening of the new station at Bridgend and the subsequent journey you took, said that it is doubtful that there would be any real improvements until at least 4 years into the franchise. Those were your words. Back in February, the Cabinet Secretary, June last year, the Cabinet Secretary, in responding to the committee report that looked into this, talked of there to be very early improvements in the next rail franchise. Why is there now the difference in timelines to see improvements which passengers, politicians and businesses want to see? Because your assessment yesterday has those improvements coming nearly a third into the life of the next franchise.
No, what I said was that people will start to see improvements in services very soon, certainly in the course of next year. But in terms of new trains, well, clearly they take time to procure and build. And in terms of electrification, for example, in terms of new trains, in terms of looking to extend the current network, well, of course, that would take us into the early part of next year. People will begin to see changes early, but the step change will come, I suspect, in round about 4 or 5 years' time, when people will see the rollout of new trains and new modes of traction.
I think the language you used yesterday did confuse the situation for many people, because we were led to believe that the change would come in the very early years. But I'm glad for the clarification you've given. The Cabinet Secretary in February indicated that the announcement as to the preferred or the winner of the tendering process would be made now in May of this year. I don't see anything on the forward outlook for next week for any announcement that's to be made. Is the First Minister able to confirm that the announcement will still be made in May as to who will be the preferred bidder, and actually the franchise will begin in October of this year as the original timeline identified?
I can confirm there's no delay to the process, and we want to make the announcement as soon as possible.
So that timeline that I've just asked you about, i.e. the announcement on the preferred bidder, will be made in May of this year, and obviously October the actual franchise will begin. So given the difference in interpretations of improvements, i.e. major improvements 4 or 5 years' time, what can you also identify as being the quick wins that can be identified for early improvements? But can I ask you just to confirm that the timeline is still being stuck to on the franchise of announcement this month, which it would be pleasing to have that announcement in this chamber, bearing in mind the last week of term, or the last week of May is half-term recess, so that we can question the Cabinet Secretary and understand exactly what's happening.
I can confirm that. In terms of what will people see immediately, well, what we would look to see are new services and more frequent services, although not necessarily obviously with new trains at that stage. There's then the question of electrification and how that's rolled out, and then new trains being procured as a result of the electrification. So people will see changes when the franchise is tendered, but the major changes are bound to come a few years down the line as we look at changing the nature of lines through electrification, as we look at new rolling stock. That's when people will start to really see a big difference in the quality of the trains.
Rwynydd Grŵp UKIP, Neil Hamilton.
Important as are the constitutional issues raised by the leader of Plaid Cymru, they're always likely to be of less immediate concern to the average person in the street than issues such as the health service. And last week, in answer to the leader of the opposition, First Minister, you were unable to give him the assurance that Betsy Cadwallader Health Board would be out of special measures by the time your term as First Minister comes to an end. The Towel Van report referred to the difficulties involved in the creation of Betsy Cadwallader in the first place, and said that organisational developments on that scale normally take between 5 and 7 years to accomplish. In the light of the Deloitte report, which was commissioned by the Welsh Government, which said that change management arrangements are not fit for purpose and remain a significant obstacle towards delivering sustainable change, can the First Minister tell us whether he thinks that there is the right culture still within Betsy Cadwallader and whether their use of personnel is sufficiently good so that it can ever pull itself out of special measures?
I believe it can pull itself out of special measures. It's not there yet. I've never been somebody who would put an artificial timetable on when it should come out of special measures. I think it's important it comes out of special measures when the time is appropriate and right. When that is, we would have to take a judgment at the time. There are challenges for Betsy Cadwallader as a result of what was in the Towel Van report. That much is true, and they will need to meet those challenges. But I don't think, for example, another reorganisation of the health service in the north of Wales would be the answer. I think stability is crucial for the next few years.
I understand the point that the First Minister makes, and I've got a great deal of sympathy with it, but the Deloitte report notes a number of worrying long-term systemic weaknesses which will need to be addressed if the delivery of health services in North Wales is to be significantly improved. For example, in relation to the transformation groups, which are supposed to deliver the improvements that we all want to see, the objectives are said to be poorly defined. Group leaders don't yet appear to be clear on accountability outside their own divisions and are yet to deliver any tangible outcomes. Service improvement members of staff are said to be overly junior. There's a lack of in-depth analysis and benchmarking. There's concern about the Project Management Office over whether the skill set actually exists to address the transformation agenda, and in responding to a question from Deloitte on whether there's sufficient project management capability and capacity to support delivery across the financial plan, the majority of managers, finance directors and members of the central finance function teams, they said that they could not say or they disagreed. So are we actually in a position at the moment where we can say we've even begun this improvement plan to any significant degree?
There have been performance improvements, but there is some way to go. And the leader of UKIP is correct in identifying the weaknesses that still need to be addressed, which is why Betsy Cadwallader will remain in special measures until such time as we can be assured as a government, and indeed that the Assembly can be assured that it's able to stand on its own 2 feet again.
But there were some damning comments in the Deloitte report about leadership in Betsy Cadwallader, and specifically executive directors operating in silos, a lack of joint corporate ownership and accountability. The chief operations officer's portfolio was said to be too large for a single individual, managing a budget of over £800 million a year. Other executive directors still establishing their portfolios, a lack of granular understanding that actions of the Health Board will need to deliver, that the actions the Health Board will need to deliver to ensure financial stability. Given that continued indictment, is there not a case for the Welsh Government getting even further involved in the process of transformation than it is already, and that the current leadership team within Betsy Cadwaladr simply have a task which is too great for them to achieve within the limitations of the administrative structure of Betsy Cadwaladr and the budget that they have available to them?
No, I think it is right to say that the situation in Betsy Cadwaladr is such that the new structure is not yet bedded in, which is why, of course, it's still in special measures, which is why I've always been absolutely firm in saying that it will remain in special measures until such time as it's able to leave. If I were to say, for example, well, it will leave special measures by X date, well, inevitably, I think that would take some of the positive pressure off in terms of making sure that the Health Board is fit for purpose in the future. I don't intend to do that. But working with the board, we intend to make sure that the board looks to a situation when it's able to run itself outside of special measures in the future.
Cwestiwn 3, Lloyd.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am gynllunio adfywio yng Ngorllewin De Cymru.
Mae'n buddsoddiad mewn cynlluniau adfywio yn helpu groeswyddi gwella sgiliau ac yn darparu'r amgylchedd cywir I busnesau gychwyn a ffynnu.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. Now, obviously, the Swansea-based City deal is obviously vital in seeking to develop jobs in South West Wales. Yet 12 months on from the City deal agreement by the UK Government, and despite the agreement by Welsh Government that local authorities can retain 50% of any business rates uplift, there are still concerns around finances and governance, most notably from Neath Port Talbot Council. So what is the Welsh Government therefore doing to tackle those concerns, and how confident are you that a joint working agreement can be finalised and agreed by the local authorities in the near future?
I understand that the concerns of Neath Port Talbot have been addressed, but there is a responsibility on local authorities, of course. The City deal is a deal which requires local authorities to work together for the good of the wider area, something that all parties in the Chamber have been keen to promote. We see, of course, the Cardiff Capital Region deal working very, very well. And it is hugely important that with our support, with the support of the UK Government, that local authorities are able to show delivery in Swansea Bay as well.
Susie Davies.
Thank you. Well, I share Lloyd's concerns, but I want to mention today that it's been a good 5 years now since it was reported that the revival, quote, of Swansea Castle would provide an extra attraction to the thousands of people who are expected to flood into the city for the Dylan Thomas centenary celebrations. Well, those celebrations are well over now, but Swansea Castle is still closed to the public. And while there are some regeneration projects around the castle, I'm wondering whether you would be prepared to approach Swansea Council to make more of the castle itself, because it's Wales Tourism Week, and much of Cadw's promotion work, of course, is based on us being a nation of castles. So I think perhaps a little government support or intervention or leverage here would be very welcome indeed.
The castle was actually almost demolished after the war, because there was so little of it left that
There's enough of it left.
In the 50s and 60s, when such things were done, the suggestion was to remove it altogether. Fortunately, that didn't happen. It is a matter ultimately for Swansea Council. I will, however, seek to get more information and write to the member with more information.
Caroline Jones.
Llywydd. First Minister, Port Talbot is not only one of the poorest parts of my region, but also one of the poorest parts of the UK. The Social Mobility Commission also ranks Port Talbot as the worst in the area in Wales for social mobility. This is despite significant Welsh Government investment. The Port Talbot waterway has created less than 100 jobs, and we also live with an element of uncertainty regarding Tata Steelworks. So, First Minister, what changes do you propose to your regeneration policies for Port Talbot, and will you support Neath Port Talbot Council's bid to relocate Channel 4 to Port Talbot?
Well, there are a number of bids from across Wales, so we have to be careful in terms of showing favouritism to any particular bid, or we would like to be supportive of all of them, of course. In terms of Port Talbot, what is crucially important to the sustainability of Port Talbot is the future of steel making. And the fact that we have, over the past 2 years, secured that, let's not forget that just before the last Assembly elections, the future looked very bleak indeed for the heavy end at Talbot. Because of the hard work that we put in, working with others, working with Tata, the money we put on the table, we've ensured that the steelmaking end of Tata has a future. And that is something in particular that's hugely important to the town. I understand that Neath Talbot County Borough Council have secured £11.5 million of the funding to deliver a programme of targeted regeneration projects to address community needs and to improve the well-being of the people of Talbot.
Cwestiwn 4, Rhiannon Pasmo.
What is the Welsh Government doing to support credit unions?
Well, £844,000 is in place over the next 2 years for credit unions to take forward projects that support financial inclusion. An additional £1 million has also been agreed to support credit unions with their growth.
Diolch. The Minister for Housing and Regeneration has rightly commented that credit unions in Wales deliver financial awareness education for adults and children. They support people dealing with debt problems and provide some of the most vulnerable people with sound and ethical financial products. And therefore, I very much welcome that the Welsh Government recently announced that credit unions across Wales will receive the additional funding, including the £844,000 of funding for projects which support people who are struggling financially. Sadly, under this UK government, these people are the many and not the few. What direct impact does the First Minister then think this financial and capacity support for credit unions will give to some of the most vulnerable people in Islwyn?
Well, I can say that officials will be meeting with the credit union sector on the 21st to discuss the financial transactions capital support that's being made available for this and the next financial year. And indeed, there's been interest from credit unions in terms of accessing that. We now have some 75,000 credit union members in Wales. And for many of credit unions members, the credit unions provide a choice that doesn't involve going to loan sharks. We know that. And we know the financial pressure that's come on people over the last 8 years as we see never-ending austerity. And that's why the credit unions play such an important role in our communities. And it's why we have been supporting them to support people.
Nick Ramsey.
First Minister, I was looking forward there to saying I agree with Rhiannon Passmore. Unfortunately, the bit at the end I found it difficult to agree with. But the first part was positive, and can I also concur with those sentiments that credit unions do a great deal of work across Wales. In South East Wales, in my area, the Gateway Credit Union has branches in Abergavenny and in Bulwark. And as Rhiannon Passmore said, they do a great deal to deal with poverty issues. Would you agree with me that it's important that we recognise the role that credit unions play in rural areas as well? It's not just an urban area that they serve. There are great pockets of rural poverty across my area and also mid-Wales as well. And they have an important role to play there. So when you're targeting this funding, will you make sure that rural areas poverty is addressed as well?
Absolutely. Credit unions are as relevant to rural areas as they are to urban areas. Some years ago, when I first went to Ireland, it was noticeable how large the credit unions were, particularly in small towns, small country towns, and the progress that had been made there. So credit unions have a relevance, and they have they provide a means of support to all communities in Wales, urban or rural.
Bethan Syed.
Diolch. Bod pobl o Gymru yn aelodau o undebau credyd yn gymharu gyda gweddill Prydain ac Iwerddon fel ydych chi newydd gweud, mae aelodaeth yn llawer is na'r gwledydd hynny. Felly pan nes I godi'r mater yma gyda chi o'r blaen, nes I godi y cysyniad o gael hyb cenedlaethol I undebau credyd. Mae arian yn mynd at nhw fel unigolion, ond mae yna lot gallen nhw ddysgu o'i gilydd mwyn nhw gallu gweithio a gwella'r hyn maen nhw'n cynnig fel undebau credyd. Ble ydych chi gyda edrych mewn i'r cysyniad hwn ac beth ydych chi fel Llywodraeth yn ei gwneud o ran hybu enyn aelodau o staff gwasanaeth sifil enghraifft I gynilo arian gyda undebau credyd mwyn sicrhau bod ni fel aelodau ac fel rheini sydd yn gweithio yma yng Nghymru yn gwneud ein rhôl ni I hybu'r sector yma.
Nes I sôn am yr arian sydd ar gael a sôn am y cyfarfod sy'n mynd I gymryd lle wythnos nesaf. Mae aelodaeth undebau credyd wedi codi o 10,000 ar ddechrau'r ganrif I 75,000 fe wedys I nawr. So felly mae yna dwf wedi bod. Ac am nesaf yn credu undebau credyd yw faint o'n eisiau tyfu. Faint o capacity sydd eisiau nhw I dyfu. Wy'n gwybod yn yr Iwerddon, mae'n bosibl I gael benthygiadau o cynnoedd o filoedd o euros, achos y ffaith bod y sefydliadau llawer yn hynach a llawer yn fwy na'r undebau credyd yng Nghymru. So felly, beth mae'n rhaid yn ystyried yw, faint mor bell mae rhai o'r undebau credyd eisiau tyfu? Ydyn nhw moyn tyfu I ddod lot yn fwy fel undebau credyd Iwerddon, neu ydyn nhw moyn sefyll yn hollol lleol? fi'n credu bod rai yn dewis yr un a rai yn dewis y llall. Ond bydd ni'n cario ymlaen i siarad yn nhw mwyn gweld am pa ffordd allan ni hybu nhw yn y pen draw.
Cwestiwn 5, Susie Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. Will the First Minister provide an update on the Swansea Bay City Region deal?
Yes, progress continues to be made towards the next stage of delivery and to unlock UK government funding.
Yes, thank you. A Groundhog Day question, I know. The Shadow Board of the Swansea Bay City deal told us that they would, if it were possible, like to add to the 11 projects that are already part of the deal. And of course, many of us have been speaking about transport potentially being an additional aspect of it. 2 weeks ago, your Economy Secretary said that work on a Swansea Parkway should be taken forward at pace, just to quote him. And with that in mind, what discussions are you holding with the Wales Office and the Transport Department for Transport about this idea? And can you tell us whether it's being discussed in the context of the City deal or more generally as part of the wider vision for transport improvement within Wales? Or maybe both? Thank you.
No, I know the idea. The idea's been on for some time with a station at Morriston, effectively, Swansea Parkway, as I understand it. There are issues because it would mean upgrading the district line, the Swansea district line, and it would bypass Swansea itself and also bypass Neath. And I know that people in Neath do not want to see their station bypassing that way. And I can well understand why it's not government policy that we would want to do that. So there would be a need to upgrade the Swansea district line, as at the moment it is a freight line and is used for occasional passenger diversions. There will also be a need to ensure that services were not lost to existing stations, particularly intercity services, not just intercity services, but all services, if that proposal was taken forward. So an interesting idea, but there are some negative potential effects unless any services on the Swansea District line were in addition to the services that already exist, serving stations such as Swansea High Street itself and Neath.
Cwestiwn 6, Leanne Wood.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the performance of the ambulance service?
Yes, the Welsh Ambulance Service continues to deliver a highly responsive service to the people of Wales despite record levels of demand. In March, 69.6% of immediately life-threatening calls received a response within 8 minutes, with a typical response time of 5 minutes and 29 seconds.
In a plenary session on January the 16th, I raised the important issue of frontline NHS workers being at breaking point as a result of the pressures being put on them on a daily basis. This related specifically to the Welsh Ambulance Service, and you pledged to investigate and to write back to me. You wrote back to me earlier this month with a reply which outlined that measures are being taken by the Ambulance Trust to support its staff, and that includes an in-house wellbeing team, which on paper sounds great, but a contact of mine says they were unable to access this service because that service never got back to them. The lack of capacity in our hospitals causing delays of transfers of care is cited by my contact as being the biggest factor in delayed ambulance responses and subsequently stress caused to call handlers. For the sake of our NHS, as well as staff and patients, when is this government going to get to grips with this problem?
Well, let me give the Leader of Plaid Cymru a fuller answer. The winter of 2017-18 did see sustained pressure across the NHS, both in Wales and the UK in general. March 2018 was, I think I'm right in saying, the busiest month ever for the ambulance service. One of the key groups of staff affected has been the 999 call takers and the control room staff who work for the Welsh Ambulance Service, as well as, of course, ambulance staff themselves and the paramedic. What the ambulance service did was approach the ambulance service charity to provide support to ambulance clinical control centres, particularly to call-taking staff. 2 sessions will run at each of the 3 regional control centres, covering the range of support mechanisms available to help staff with their emotional and physical well-being, but also the wider support available from TASC, the charity, in areas such as financial management, preparing for the future, and other benefits that TASC provides for ambulance staff. Now, feedback from the staff has been that those sessions were invaluable, and the Trust is now looking at how TASC resources can be used to support staff in the future as part of the Trust's response to operational pressure.
David Melding.
With First Minister, over the 3 winter months, 1,860 people who were classified as amber, and you will know this includes people suffering from a stroke or a heart attack, were made to wait over 6 hours for their ambulance. Now, this is surely unacceptable, and we need to ensure that next winter some of these very basic standards are met.
Well, I can say that at the request of the Cabinet Secretary, the Chief Ambulance Services Commissioner has commenced a clinically led review specifically on the amber category, alongside work that's ongoing at the moment to look at ambulance responsiveness, clinical outcomes and patient experience. There are 4 things in particular that the review will look at. Firstly, the current state in respect of extant policy, practice and guidance. Secondly, the expectations and experiences of the public, staff and the wider service around ambulance response to amber calls. Thirdly, consideration of environmental factors such as the location of an incident, the age of a patient when determining allocation of a response, and fourthly, other external or internal factors which may contribute to or impact on how WAST responds to amber category calls. And that work is ongoing.
Rhiannon Passmore.
The amount of emergency ambulance calls during 2016-17 was up 116% on the number of emergency ambulance calls made in previous years. And this is a staggering increase by any calculation. Yet the Welsh Ambulance Service has for 30 consecutive months met its national response time target for red calls, thanks to our clinical response model and our staff delivering care quicker to those who need it most. And a model rubbished by the Welsh Tories as moving the goalposts, and a model now being looked at to be replicated in England by their Westminster Tory colleagues. Will the First Minister join me then in praising the dedicated men and women of the ambulance service who continue to contribute to our wonderful Welsh National Health Service in the year of its 70th anniversary, and further outline what we can do to further aid their invaluable work?
Well, can I join the member in paying my regard and consideration and thanks indeed to the ambulance staff for what they do in saving lives day after day in Wales. I can say that significant resources have been invested in the last few years, targeted at ensuring that the number of frontline staff is increased both in the control centres and indeed on the road. We have a record number of staff actually employed in the service. And back in October, we announced an £8.2 million investment to enable the Welsh Ambulance Service to continue upgrading the existing fleet, which brings the total investment in new ambulance vehicles since 2011 to almost £45 million.
Question 7, Neil Hamilton.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the provision of healthcare in Wales?
Well, we continue to invest in the provision of healthcare services in Mid Wales, including £6.6 million on the Llandrindod Wells War Memorial Hospital. And we'll continue to work with health boards in the region to provide healthcare services that deliver the best possible outcomes for patients.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. I've seen many health service reorganisations in the course of my lifetime, and it's always a great problem bringing about change, even beneficial change. They're always going to be perceived to be winners and losers. The Hywel Dda University Health Board proposed their big NHS change, which will affect the provision of healthcare facilities throughout the Hywel Dda area. Will you agree with me that any change which does take place should not disadvantage very significant areas of population within the health board in order to benefit other parts of the area? In particular, in Llanelli, there's a proposal to downgrade the Prince Philip Hospital, which will see the provision of 24/7 acute medical services affected, adequate bed space in the highest populated area of Hywel Dda will be reduced, a specialist breast oncology unit will not be there, and also it will affect mental health services. If changes are going to be acceptable to the public at large, then they have to benefit the maximum number of people and not disadvantage them.
Well, there are 2 objectives to my mind to the exercise. First of all, to have the fullest possible consultation. And secondly, to ensure that what we see, not just in Hywel Dda but across Wales, is the best, safest, most sustainable health service for the population. And that is something as a government we'd want to see across Wales.
Russell George.
First Minister, a constituent, Mr Robert Jones, has recently informed me that he can no longer collect his prescription from the pharmacy within the building of his GP practice because of dispensing rules which have changed as a result of being brought in following the National Health Service Regulations 2013. Now, in spite of the fact that he has been registered at the practice for the whole of his life, it's clearly common sense, as far as I can see, for him to be able to collect his prescription from within the building he was given the prescription. So I do find the policy difficult to comprehend when the constituent is already at their GP practice. can you commit to looking again at this issue and see if there is sufficient flexibility within the system? From the correspondence I've received back from the Health Minister, that doesn't seem to be the case, so that these regulations do not have these kinds of unintended consequences.
I've not heard that, I have to say. I mean, the member asked a question that, with respect, is hyper-local. It deserves an answer, but that answer will need to come, if he gives me further details, via a letter.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. It's been a delight today to welcome Ellie Neville to the Assembly, and many Assembly members have met her. She's raised nearly £160,000 now as a 6- and 7-year-old to Ward 10 cancer treatment in Withybush, and I'm sure you'll join me in a minute, First Minister, hopefully in thanking her for her efforts. But what it really underlines, of course, is how important those services are to local communities and how committed communities are to them. You told me last week that in the options being considered for Hywel Dda, you as a government and you as a First Minister had no preference. Wouldn't it be better, therefore, if your own Assembly members did not campaign for or against some of these options, but let the public have that wider consultation and then take some decisions in the cold light of day with good clinical evidence to date with that and with the best evidence possible from the Health Cabinet Secretary around the availability of funding also?
Well, firstly, I've had the pleasure of meeting Ellie before, and it's wonderful to welcome her back to this building. She's done a fantastic job in raising so much money, and it's great to know that she's here. Well, secondly, if it were the case that no AMs were going to campaign in any way with regard to Hywel Dda's consultation, it might be a level playing field, but I suspect that's going a little bit too far in terms of what to expect. Backbench Labour AMs are free, of course, to represent their communities. That's what there are more restrictions, of course, on those in government, naturally. But I'm sure that all AMs who live in the Hywel Dda area will make their views known as part of the consultation.
Cwestiwn 8, Rhina Piorwerth.
Diolch Llywydd, a wneud y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am gefnogaeth I borthladd Caergybi.
Wel, ni'n parhau I weithio gyda Steneline a helpu I wneud y mwyaf o potensial Caergybi I gynyddu twf economaidd a dod â mwy o swyddi i'r rhanbarth. Mae hwn yn cynnwys trafod cynlluniau am anghorfa aml ddefnydd newydd, a ni wedi rhoi £100,000,000 o bunnoedd drwy'r gronfa datblygu porthladdoedd tuag at y gwaith o gynnal astudiaeth o ymarferoldeb.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Dydd Gwener yma mae grŵp yn cael ei ail ymgynnull fydd yn dod â gwahanol ddefnyddwyr y porthladd at ei gilydd, yn cael ei gyd gadeirio gen I fel aelod cynulliad ag aelod seneddol Ynys Môn, a dwi'n ddiolchgar am y cadarnhad yn yr 3/4 awr diwetha bydd Llywodraeth Cymru yn gyrru swyddog i'r cyfarfod hwnnw. Ond ar drothwy y cyfarfod, mi hoffwn I apelio am ffocws clir iawn gan Lywodraeth Cymru ar gefnogi a buddsoddi ymhorthladd Caergybi a'r is-adeiledd, trafnidiaeth ag ati sy'n gwasanaethu'r porthladd hwnnw. Achos yn enwedig yn sgil her Brexit, yr her o gystadleuaeth gan borthladdoedd eraill fel Lerpwl, yr her o groesiadau uniongyrchol sy'n datblygu fwy a mwy o Iwerddon I Ffrainc, mae'n rhaid sicrhau bod porthladd rhagorol Caergybi yn parhau I fod yn gystadleuol mwyn swyddi yn uniongyrchol yno, ac wrth gwrs economi ehangach Ynys Môn, a nid yn unig Gogledd Cymru ond Cymru hefyd.
Mae Brexit yn her wrth gwrs I Gaergybi a'r porthladdoedd eraill fel Doc Penfro ag Abergwaun. Wy'n cofio'r amser lle oedd yna dolle yng Nghaergybi. Doedd ddim pawb yn cael ei tseco, ond ta beth oedd yna... Sech chi'n cael eich dyla yna, felly oedd yna broblem ynglyn â'r ffaith bod chi fod aros a wedyn symud ymlaen. I fi, mae'n ddoi beth. Yn gynta, dwi ddim yn gwybod beth yn gwmws bydd yn digwydd rhwng Caergybi a'r Iwerddon. Ni wedi gweud wrth gwrs dylai dim byd I fynd wrth dweud dylai Senedd I sefyll yn yr undeb tolle. Mae hwnna'n holl bwysig. Pan roedd y Irish Ferries, un o'r pethau oedd yn haro I, o'n nhw'n gweud wrtho fi, wel, mae yna potensial I fynd ar llongau o Iwerddon I Ffrainc, ond yw'r capacity ddim yn yr un ffordd. Mae'n amhosib I gael yr un capacity a fynd rhwng enghraifft Dilyn a Chaergybi. A broblem I nhw oedd, sefyllfa lle byddwn yn mynd ar beth o pysgod, ffindo yng Nghaergybi bod nhw'n ffili mas o'r porthladd digon cyflym, a wedyn ni colli'r fferi yn Dover. A wedyn ni, wrth gwrs, colli'r cargo'n hollol. Hwna'n rhywbeth o'n nhw'n gweld oedd yn holl bwysig I ddatrys. Ar hyn o bryd, dwi ddim yn gweld unrhyw fath o fusoddiad gan Lywodraeth Unedig yn rhwydwaith yng Nghaergybi, ond wrth gwrs beth byddwn ni moyn gweld yw dim tolle, ac gweithio byth unrhyw fath o reolaeth ynglyn â pasbortau yng Nghaergybi. Na gyd bydde hwnna'n neud, wrth gwrs, yw wneud e'n mwy anodd i ddefnyddio'r porthladd a roi mantes ynglyn â cystadleuaeth i borthladdoedd fel Ken Ryan a Lerpwl.
Cwestiwn 9, Sian Gwenllian.
Prif Weinidog roi'r wybodaeth ddiweddara am gynyddu'r ddarpariaeth addysg feddygol ym Mangor.
Wel, ni'n parhau credu bod modd i Brifysgol Bangor mewn cydweithrediad ag ysgolion meddygol Caerdydd ag Abertawe i gynnig mwy o gyfleoedd ar gyfer addysg a hyfforddiant meddygol yn y Gogledd. Ni yn gweithio gyda'r prifysgolion a gynigion i ddarparu addysg feddygol gynaliadwy felly yn y Gogledd.
Mi fyddwch chi'n ymwybodol wrth gwrs fod mod i wedi bod yn blaenoriaethu ymgyrch i gael ysgol feddygol i Fangor, oherwydd mod i'n credu fod o'n ffordd o wella gofal cleifion ar draws y Gogledd. Ac mi nes i gomisiynu'r adroddiad yma delio ar argyfwng oedd yn amlinellu'r achos yn glir iawn ac fe gafwyd cytundeb rhwng Plaid Cymru a Llafur ac neilldiwyd 7 miliwn o bunna y flwyddyn tuag at ddatblygu cynllun i gynyddu hyfforddiant feddygol yn y Gogledd. Dwi'n falch bod y trafodaethau'n parhau, ond fi hoffwn i fanylion ynglyn â'r gwariant yma, yn enwedig yr elfen gwariant cyfalaf o'r arian sydd wedi glusnodi, ac mi hoffwn i gael ymrwymiad gynnwch chi heddiw y gewn i ddatganiad clir yn dangos y cynnydd ar y mater yma, os gwelwch yn dda.
Wel, allai roi'r ymrwymiad hynny. Mae'n bwysig i Fangor i weithio gyda Caerdydd ag Abertawe mwyn cael mynediad i ysbytau mawr y de hefyd, mwyn rhoi addysg cyflawn i unrhyw doctor sydd yn hyfforddi. Yr opsiwn arall i gweithio gyda Lerpwl. Wel, i fi, mae'n well bod ni'n creu system addysgol Cymreig ynglyn â meddyginiaeth rhwng y de a'r Gogledd. Mae'r gwaith yna yn parhau, unwaith oedd y gwaith yn barod, mi'n siŵr bydd yna gangen cael ei wneud.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yr eitem nesaf yw'r datganiad a chyhoeddiad busnes, a dwi'n galw ar